Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this public consultation webinar for the draft Galway County Development Plan 2022 to 2028. My name is Patrick O'Sullivan, and I am one of the planners in the Forward Planning and Policy Unit with Galway County Council, and I will be the MC for today's event. So, the draft Galway County Development Plan has been on public display since the 20th of May 2021, and submissions are invited from the public with the final date for submissions, the 30th of July 2021. The purpose of this public consultation event is to engage and inform the public of the draft county development plan and encourage you to make a submission and let us know your views and opinions on the draft county development plan and how you would like to see your county develop over the lifetime of the next county development plan. During this public consultation period, we have advertised the draft county development plan and invited submissions on newspapers, local radio stations, on our website and via our social media outlets. We have also prepared a video clip advertising this public consultation period. To date, we have had in the region of 26,000 interactions with the public on our social media platforms, and there have been 4,250 views of the video clip. As of this evening, we've received a total of 70 submissions on the draft county development plan. There are just over 4 weeks remaining in this public consultation period, and we would urge everybody to have their say and make a submission before the deadline date of the 30th of July. With respect to today's public consultation, there will shortly be an opening address from the Director of Services for Planning and Sustainable Development and Corporate Services, Michael Owens. This will be followed by our draft county development plan video clip and a presentation on the draft county development plan. The first half of this presentation will be provided by one of our planners, Brian Corcoran, with the second half of the presentation provided by our senior planner, Valerie Loughnane. At the end of the presentation, there will be a question and answer session. You'll see it within the webinar that there is a Q&A option available, and I would invite you to use this during the presentation. Also, if you'd like any clarifications or specific questions about the plan, please use this function. We will group these questions by topic, and we will do our best to answer all these questions before we conclude this webinar event. I would also like to advise that this webinar is being recorded and will be available on the website for information purposes. Before I hand you over to Michael, our Irish officer, aighneachtaí, is going to just give some information in Australia. Thank you, Una.
Dírí bacharde díach le curniúib nach féidir an dáleagan Gailge agus béarla chuir in scáil an trúna nacht ach bei an dáleagan fáil agus be se chuir in síveidirlín tarhéis na simnar gréis an seo méarla agus an Gailge ach tá míle fáil trú freisin trúna nach maint begéire in cheiste chur trí Gailge chuisteach san crapbeg hís Q&A níochtar agus díana muid chola ar nícheall iad a dagart chamagus is féidir agus tá míle fáil trú bar fad rúpan seo nacht. Sinead?
Thank you, Una. I'd now like to hand you over to our Director of Services, Michael Owens, for his opening address.
Thank you, Pat, and good evening. As Director of Services with responsibility for planning and sustainable development, I'm delighted to have this opportunity to welcome you to this, our second public webinar on the Draft County Development Plan 2022 to 2028. As Pat has outlined, we commenced the review of the Draft County Development Plan just over a year ago, which culminated in the publication of the draft plan on the 20th of May 2021. This began a 10-week consultation period, which will conclude on the 30th of July. The draft plan has been prepared in accordance with the targets set out in the National Planning Framework and the Regional Spatial and Economic Strategy for the North West region. The plan sets out a population growth across the county in excess of 18,000 persons, which equates to a requirement to deliver in excess of 6,000 residential units during the plan period. Suitable employment locations have also been identified to accommodate this increase in population. The Forward Planning Policy team will shortly talk you through the key areas of the Draft County Development Plan, which range includes housing, employment, environment, renewable energy, tourism, and community facilities, for example. Along with extensive public consultation, there has been also engagement with our elected members who have guided the policy direction and the formulation of the draft County Development Plan in developing the zoning and the policy objectives of the draft plan. I also wish to avail of this opportunity to acknowledge the work and input of the forward planning team in relation to the development of the draft plan under the leadership and guidance of Valerie Lucknan, Senior Planner. We look forward to engaging with you in this process, and we encourage you to make your submissions to us on or before the 30th of July. Thank you.
Sorry, just having a little trouble here.
If there's a problem with the video, Cormac, I can...
The draft Galway County Development Plan is currently on display until July 30th. To date, we have received a number of submissions from members of the public. This planning framework sets out how your county will develop up to 2028, and we want your thoughts on this. We want to hear your views on the draft plan. How would you like to see your county develop over the coming years? Where do you think people should live? Where should people work? Did you know that there are over 5,000 people working in Parkmore? How can public transport provision be improved? Do we need more community facilities? What about schools, creches, open space or playgrounds? What do you think of your local town or village? How could it be improved? What about the open countryside? What about renewable energy or the environment? What are your thoughts? Did you know that County Galway has the highest number of Natura 2000 sites, which include most of our rivers, lakes and coastal areas? Is there any particular type of development that you would like to see in your area? The draft plan seeks to answer these questions, but now it's time for you to get involved and have your say. View the draft County Development Plan at consult.galway.ie. Remember that the deadline for submissions is July 30th at 4:30 p.m. You can call us on 509 396 if you have any questions.
Good evening and welcome to this evening's webinar. I'd like to take you through the first half of our presentation this evening and talk you through the main bits of the draft county development plan. So we would like to discuss with you what is a county development plan, demographics of County Galway, the contents of the plan, a bit about the process and timelines where we are at the moment and how to get involved, of course. So just a bit about the demographics of County Galway. In 2016, which was the last time a census was taken in Ireland, we had just under 180,000 population, 2.2% increase on 2011 census. County Galway is situated in the northern western regional area. The other counties in the region are Mayo, Roscommon, Leitrim, Sligo, Donegal, Cavan and Monaghan. Tuam, Ballinasloe, Oranmore, Athenry and Loughrea are the largest towns in the county. Tuam and Ballinasloe are our key towns as designated in the RSES, and Athenry is designated as a location of strategic potential. Some of our towns are serviced by motorways, including the M6, M17 and M18, and of course the rail network, the Dublin-Galway rail line and the Galway-Limerick rail line. So this is an infographic which is contained in chapter 1 of volume 1 of the draft plan, and it's just a picture diagram which gives the different statistical breakdown of the county household size and that sort of thing. So gives a general overview of the county. What is county development plan? A framework that guides the future development of the county over the next 6-year period. It ensures that there is enough land zoned in the county to meet future housing, economic and social needs. It contains policy objectives to ensure appropriate development that happens in the right place with consideration of environmental and cultural and, of course, natural heritage. The hierarchy of plans, then you'll see the NPF is at the top. That's the National Planning Framework. This is followed by our regional strategy, which I mentioned, the Regional Spatial and Economic Strategy, followed by city and county development plans, local economic and community plans, and then local area plans. The 10 national strategic outcomes there on the left-hand side of this slide are set out in the NPF and also the Sustainable Development Goals. These are contained within chapter 1 of the County Development Plan. Process and timelines then. So we started into the process just over a year ago now. We published our draft plan on the 20th of May this year with a 10-week consultation. This runs up until the 30th of July. So as part of the consultation process, we are holding our second webinar this evening, and we invite submissions and observations from you during this period, and you have up until the 30th of July to make a submission to us. How to get involved? Visit the website. It's very easy. Visit consult.galway.ie. You can attend a webinar, view a hard copy of the plan, make an appointment to review the documents in the planning department here in Áras an Chontae, Prospect Hill, Galway. And you can make a submission in hard copy. Hard copy submissions as well will be received. But consult.galway.ie, that's where you can view the draft plan and make your submission. And the presentation here has some links and that which take you to the certain chapters set out in the draft plan. Volume 1 is the written statement of the plan. Contains 15 chapters with narrative and policy objectives. Volume 2 then focuses on settlement plans, includes a metropolitan plan, small growth towns and small growth villages. There's a number of appendices which include housing strategy, local authority, renewable energy strategy, landscape character assessment, and the Galway County Transport Strategy. Environmental documents, including the strategic environmental assessment, appropriate assessment, and strategic flood risk assessment are also appended to the plan and are available on that website, consult.galway.ie. Volume 1 then, so chapter 1 of volume 1. This chapter provides an overview of the county and the statutory process of making the development plan. The key legislative and guidance requirements to which the plan must adhere are also addressed in chapter 1. The vision, each chapter you'll notice in volume 1 contains a vision. The vision promotes the creation of an attractive county to live, work, visit and enable businesses to flourish in an environment that offers a range of housing options, robust and diverse range of employment opportunities, access to quality infrastructure and community facilities with a high quality sustainable environment for all. Where we live, the core strategy and population distribution, this is set out in chapter 2 of volume 1. This is in the core strategy population distribution is in accordance with the transitional roadmap from the NPF, and just the table below then you'll see are the population trends over the years. So each year is a census year, starting off in 1991 and going up to the most recent census, which was 2016. So the next slide there, you'll see the overall population allocation in the county development plan for 22 to 28 that Michael mentioned in his speech there. And that's the figure there at the bottom. That's the allocation in the plan up to 2028. And then the breakdown, then a further breakdown of the population allocation and housing requirement over the plan period, which is set out in chapter 2 of volume 1. and it's broken down into each settlement, which includes, as I've mentioned, the metropolitan area, the key towns, the town of strategic potential, the self-sustaining towns of Gorse and Loughrea, small growth towns, small growth villages, and then the rural settlements and the rural area. This table, which is again set out in chapter 2 of the draft plan of volume 1, it just provides a description of each of the settlement tiers of the settlement hierarchy, and the role of each settlement, you know, the importance of each settlement. Each settlement is different in the county, and you know, the roles and are slightly different for each area. So, you know, in short, the summary sets out the growth agenda in the county over the plan period. This is informed by the projected level of growth set out in the MPF and RSES. The settlement hierarchy has outlined the role and function of the identified settlements in accordance with and close alignment to the RSES. The housing strategy is informed by this process with the focus on the provision of housing, household size, and housing types that will meet the forecasted growth. This is just a map of the county then. It shows the rail network and road network across the county, as well as some of our towns and villages across the county. So where we live, chapter 2, core strategy, settlement strategy, and housing strategy. They're all set out in chapter 2 of the draft plan. It seeks the promotion of a balanced urban and rural county that ensures future growth is based on the principles of sustainable development, delivering a high quality living and working environment meeting the needs of all residents. Chapter 3 then is our placemaking, regeneration and urban living chapter. The vision for this chapter is to develop the urban and rural settlements of the county as vibrant, connected and service locations that are attractive places to live, work and visit in a sustainable manner, based on the principles of placemaking, compact growth, high quality public realm, where residential developments are connected to services and employment locations. While chapter 4 then supports the role of rural areas in maintaining a stable population base through a strong network of villages and small towns, and strengthening rural communities by supporting a resilient rural economy and the sustainable management of land and resources. In relation to chapter 3, this chapter outlines the process of placemaking and how the towns and villages can achieve this and deliver attractive places for people to live. Regeneration focuses on the various legislative requirements that must be carried out, while the urban living supports the development of sustainable communities that facilitates the changing circumstances in which people live across County Galway. This slide then, as I've mentioned, these are some of the links to chapters 2, 3 and some of the zoning maps of the draft plan, so they'll take you straight to the consult website, and we will make this presentation available to you afterwards. It will be up on our website. So where we live, rural areas and villages in the open countryside, the provision for living in these areas in the more rural villages in the county, and indeed in the open countryside, the policy and policy objectives and the narrative set out in chapter 4 of the plan. Level 7 category of settlement hierarchy is serviced and unserviced villages. So in unserviced villages, that doesn't, you know, there is a provision, there is a suite of policy objectives, I should say, are set out in chapter 4 of volume 1. We've then, within that, then we've got areas under urban influence, which is the gCTPS, structurally weak areas of the county, and the Gaeltacht areas. We also have landscape categories 2, 3, and 4. So depending on where you're living, the relevant policy objectives apply. Just a map here then of the gCTPS, as I mentioned, and the structurally weak areas then on the peripheral edges of the county. This is our shows our metropolitan area here, the different areas in the county, the structurally weak areas, and including the different landscape categories, and of course the Gaeltacht areas then to the west of the county. So onto employment opportunities in the county. So employment opportunities in the county obviously are very important, and you know, they're set out in various chapters in the draft plan. So particular relevance to chapter 4, 5 and 6. So chapter 4 again is the rural living and development chapter. It supports the role of rural areas in maintaining a stable population base through a strong network of villages and small towns, and strengthening rural communities by supporting a resilient rural economy and the sustainable management of land and resources. Chapter 5 is the economic development, enterprise and retail development chapter. This chapter seeks to develop and build on the economic strengths and assets of the county as a thriving, competitive and attractive place for a range of sectors to locate, based on the principles of a well-established economic base that is highly appealing to both investors and employees. While chapter 8 then is our tourism and landscape chapter, and the vision for this chapter is to encourage the development of the tourism sector as an economic driver for the county, whilst ensuring the landscapes, which are one of the county's most important assets, are protected. Some hyperlinks there as well to the chapters that I've mentioned, which again, will, as I mentioned, will be available on the website. So just a bit about the economic profile and jobs ratio of the settlement. This is chapter 5 of the draft plan of volume 1, and there is a strong emphasis placed on job creation across our county and our towns and villages. We recognise the importance of job creation and employment growth in our county, and we recognise in this chapter that total employment increased with 8.5% growth. Some 61.3% of County Galway's adults are in the labour force, either working or looking for work, close to the national average, 61.9%. The 85,000 people who are in the county's labour force represents a 0.6% increase on the 2011 figure, compared with 3.2% nationally. The share of County Galway's adults who are at work, 54.1%, is above the national average, while the share of unemployed is somewhat lower. As the plan seeks to foster employment creation and maximise the jobs potential and growth towns throughout the county and achieve greater alignment between population and employment opportunities, it is a high-level policy objective to work towards a jobs ratio of 0.70 and above for our main urban areas. So we're looking to we look to encourage employment formation, employment development across the county in the various settlements, and indeed in the rural area too. Another table here, which is contained in chapter 5 of volume 1. Again, it's based on the settlement hierarchy, which you'll have seen earlier, but it looks at the economic role of each settlement, starting off with the metropolitan area, which includes Ballyclare, Barna, Oranmore, and the two urban framework plan areas of Garron and Briar Hill, and then the former airport site. It also recognises the importance of the key towns, which are Tuam and Banaslow, and the town of strategic potential, which is Athenry. We still have two other self-sustaining towns, which are Gort and Loughrea, and then the 5 small growth towns that are set out in volume 2. That's Clifton, Mockhulen, Uachtarard, Portumna and Hetford. This is just an economic map of the county. It shows the economic engine, the maritime corridor there. I should say we have a standalone marine chapter in volume 1 now for the first time, marine and coastal management chapter, which looks at the importance of and the contribution that the marine sector plays in County Galway, and it contains some narrative and again a suite of policy objectives. The primary centre identified for growth in the region is the Galway metropolitan area, which, as I mentioned, is the Oranmore, Ballyclare and Barna. They're the main settlements, with the Garron and Briar Hill urban framework plans, and then we have the former airport site. The airport site then is identified as a key growth enabler in the NPF, and we recognise that in the plan, and in particular in chapter 5 of volume 1. The RSES acknowledges that ore and moor forms a significant proportion of the land supply and can accommodate future large-scale employment. These lands benefit from being easily accessible due to the improvement of the wider road network in the form of the M6 and M17, M18 motorways. Also, just to mention, you know, we recognise that there's a network of settlements across the county of various scales and sizes with various population, and we recognise that there is a role for every town and every village across the county to play in terms of providing, you know, economic growth and prosperity across the county. Just a bit about the sectors, particular sectors and clusters of employment across the county. So we have our tourism sector, which is recognised as quite a strong sector across County Galway, the renewable energy and low carbon future sector, and the role that County Galway has to play in delivering this. As I mentioned, the marine and blue economy, ICT and digital enterprise, the life science, medtech, pharma, biotech, healthcare, advanced manufacturing and engineering, agri-tech and agri-food, along with retail. We also, you know, we recognise in the plan the you know, the onset of home working and the rollout of remote working hubs in towns and villages across Ireland, and this is referenced in Chapter 5 of Volume 1 as well. So I'd now like to hand you over to my colleague Valerie Lucknan, who'll take you through the second half of the presentation this evening.
Thanks very much, Brian, and welcome to everybody to this evening's webinar. I'm just going to finish off the presentation and go through the second half of it. So effectively, we're going to look at, in volume 1, again, as Brian has said, the plan is divided into 2 volumes with appendices and associated documentation. So infrastructure, under this topic, there are 3 relevant chapters in the county plan. So we have Chapter 6, which is transport and movement, Chapter 7, infrastructure, utilities, environmental protection, and Chapter 14, which is climate change, energy and renewable energy. So from the point of view of transport and movement, we have a new County Galway transport and planning strategy, which is a replacement for the previous strategy that we had. This particular strategy now is effectively a complementary document to the GTS, which is the Galway Transport Strategy, which is for most of most of the city and so on. So within this, all the transport and movement chapter, we're dealing with an overall strategy for how we can move in the future for transport and movement throughout the county. In Chapter 7, we have utilities, infrastructure and environmental protection. All of these very important. We talk about wastewater, we talk about electricity and gas infrastructure, and the supports and development that would enhance digital infrastructure. And in Chapter 14, very important now, throughout the plan, in each one of the plan chapters, we have a piece on climate action. So how that particular chapter and topic interacts with climate change, and how climate change is affected by it, and it affects climate action, and how we deal with that. But we also have a specific chapter, Chapter 14, on climate change, energy and energy renewable. So we associated with that, we have a local authority renewable energy strategy, which is to replace what we currently have in our county development plan, which is just a wind energy strategy. But this strategy incorporates all renewable energies, things like wind, solar, bioenergy, and lots of the new technologies that will come on stream into the future. So anybody who's interested in renewable energy and so on, I know there's been quite a lot of interest as well when we've been getting submissions and so on with respect to the wind element of that is the place to go to look for that particular information. And I know there are a number of questions that were raised with us, and we hope to be able to answer those questions or some of those towards the end of the session when we get to our Q&A section. So again, like Brian says, this will be published, this presentation, and when it's published, each one of these web links, you'll be able to link in by clicking on the links and getting into the individual chapters and viewing each one of those. And then if you click on the appendices, you'll be able to get into the County Galway Transport and Planning Strategy, and also the Local Authority Renewable Energy Strategy, which are associated with each one of these. To follow on again then, I suppose, with the map, which will show you there the infrastructural transport corridors. Now, we're quite lucky in Galway, we're well serviced by a good road network, particularly east to west with our M6. We have our M17 north, M18 north to south, and then we have our link out into the west of our county, our N59 to Clifton. And at the moment, there are upgrade works going on that particular road at the moment, hoping to shorten the journeys from the city and all of the other locations like Moycullen and Uachtarard out to Clifton. And that work is underway currently. We also have the R336, which is the road that runs along the coast and so on. And there is an objective in our plan with respect to strengthening that also. So that gives you kind of your strategic potential area, which we mentioned to be Athenry. It shows our key towns of Ballinasloe and Tuam that Brian already mentioned, and then our self-sustaining towns of Gort and Loch Ray, with our MASP towns of Ballyaclare, Barna, and Oranmore. So they're located within the MASP. And I know there was a question there with respect to that, so we can come back to that later and explain why Ballyaclare is in the MASP. It's in the Metropolitan Area Strategic Plan and how that came about. So we just have this particular map here, which is in our local authority renewable energy strategy, which shows our wind potential. And again, I know that there have been a number of queries about zoning in on the maps, and all of the chapters at the top of each one of them, there's the PDF document. And if you download the PDF document, it is very easy then to zoom in and zoom out on all of the maps there. Now, I appreciate some of these are a little bit at smaller scale, and we have larger scale maps that people can come and view here in our office by appointment, and if they wish to see them in a slightly larger format. But if you do go into the PDF, you will be able to zoom in and zoom in much closer to get a better view of it. So that particular one is the wind potential map, and we also have a solar potential map there as well, which will come up on your screen shortly. And again, it's layered up in order to give the areas which is acceptable in principle, and all of the different other various keys that you'll see down through that. And again, all of that you can zoom in on that when you download the PDF documents. The next, in volume 1, we have the topic of natural assets. So within that, now Brian has already mentioned tourism and landscape, because again, tourism falls under the economic chapter, and he's talked a little bit about that previously. But it also falls under our natural assets, because tourism and landscape in particular is a natural asset for us in our county, particularly in our county, because we're very rich landscapes and very diverse type landscapes all over our county, from both the west and east, north and south. So our tourism and landscape, we have our marine and coastal management, and again, this was part of a chapter in our current county development plan, but because of its importance, and also the marine planning framework is going to be published quite shortly as well, and because of the huge coastline we do have and how important it is to our county, we felt that the it as an individual chapter was very important, and it deals with coastal management, because again, you know, our climate change, we've had lot more storms than we've had in the past over the last 10 years, and certainly we need to manage our coast from coastal erosion and so on, as well as all other aspects of managing it. In our chapter 10, it's our Natural Heritage, Biodiversity and Green and Blue Infrastructure chapter. It talks about all our sites, designated sites and so on, and we've quite a number of designated sites within the county to the west mainly, but we also have a significant number in the Slieve Aughties. We have around the Suck and the Callows, that in the southern part of the county, as well as the southeastern part of the county, and then we also have some SACs up around Williamstown, Glenamaddy and so on up there. So we have a number of designated sites all over the county and how we treat with those. Lots of interest always in natural heritage, and both this chapter and the chapter we do on architectural heritage was huge input from our colleagues in our heritage officer on chapter 10, and then our conservation officer also on the chapter that we deal with architectural heritage. And just to say as well, we liaised and were partnered with our colleagues in the road section when we were dealing with the transportation study which we've produced, and also we would have our environment colleagues would have helped us in terms of having a look as well at our LARS, our local authority renewable energy, and they all fed into those particular strategies. So from that perspective, again, Brian has just put on the slide there kindly. He's doing all the hard work tonight. They are the links again that you can just, when we publish, you'll be able to click straight into those chapters. Just to have a look at the map again. So we talked there about different landscapes and so on and so forth. So there's a map which will show us our coastal landscapes, our central Galway complex landscapes. We have our urban environment landscapes. We have our Slieve-Oxy landscapes down to the south, Shannon Environs landscape, and so on and so forth. And again, all of these are available. We have a landscape strategy, which again is it has been updated, and a new strategy put in place with all of the new designations in terms of landscape classifications and so on and so forth. And that again can be viewed in our appendices, downloaded, and it's a very interesting read from a landscape perspective because it feeds into so much we do in our county. And it's also noted in that, you will notice in that landscape strategy, that we do acknowledge that our landscape is a working landscape and that we all do have to work within it, live within it, and obviously have recreational facilities within it. So all of our policy objectives would be also gearing towards that aspect as well. Not forgetting it. From the point of view of landscape, again, we have 4 classifications. In our current county development plan, we have 5, but we currently now have 4, going from low, high, special, and iconic. And I suppose our iconic landscapes would match our landscape sensitivity class 5 that's in our current county development plan, and that's how it matches up, and so on and so forth. So again, you'll be able to see with the color coding there what landscape sensitivity would be in your particular area, and particular noting that the islands and so on, and a lot of Connemara does have iconic landscapes, and they're the landscapes that we all recognise and are world renowned, not just nationally renowned. And I suppose we have to protect those landscapes in order to keep the landscape free of any particular impediments that is going to damage it. So from the point of view of our next part of our chapter, which is our cultural and social assets piece, and so our chapter 11, chapter 12, and chapter 13 fall under this particular topic. So we have our community development and social infrastructure chapter, a very important chapter, and again we have engaged with our colleagues and the PPN in our community and enterprise section, and they've given us an opportunity to present to the PPN and the SPCs, and we would have got a lot of feedback as well in terms of written submissions in the pre-draft with respect to community development and social infrastructure. Very important that we have also look at healthcare. We look at the future needs of what people may need in the future needs with respect to housing, with respect to how we move and how we work. Equality, we look at social inclusion, and very much look as well at disabilities and how to ensure that we have universal design to ensure that everybody in the county and visitors to our county are able to enjoy all of the natural assets that we do have. Our chapter 12 is our architectural, archaeological and cultural heritage, very important again. And again, this and chapter 14 in a way sometimes overlink as well. So both of those chapters could be read together because there is some areas that they overlap. And again, our architectural conservation officer that's here with us as well inputted greatly into that chapter. We have chapter 13, a designated chapter for Galway, Gaeltacht and the Islands, very important part of our county, and so it deserves a chapter for itself. It deals with the Gaeltacht, the islands, their unique and special places, how they have distinctive needs, how their natural heritage and natural beauty has to be dealt with, and so on, and also how people who live in the Gaeltacht, work in the Gaeltacht, and want to improve and increase the amount of the Irish language spoken and so on, and how policies and policy objectives from the development plan can help them to go forward and do that as well. So very important chapter there for us in chapter 13. So again, the next slide will just show you the links that are there and that you can click on when we actually publish the presentation, which will be up on our website, and you'll be able to link into those. The next map there that we have shows our ACAs, and you'll see these and you'll find these in volume 2 as well in our settlement strategy, where our local area plans, which are now incorporated into our development plans under our small growth towns and small growth villages and our metropolitan areas. So we've got architectural conservation areas in all of those, and that's just a map to indicate those. So chapter 15, again, it's a part of our county development plan. It is the development management standards. So again, they're just the, I suppose, nuts and bolts of how and to give guidance people if they're making planning applications with respect to the technical requirements for any planning application, all based on our chapters that are in our development plan and the objectives that have come out of those. So I'm going to run through very quickly just to give an overview of the settlement plans. And I know, like I said, there was one question with respect to the metropolitan area and Ballyclore. So if this may help in answering that question, but we certainly answer that question directly as well. So volume 2 contains our settlement plans. And it contains our metropolitan area strategic plan. So this is a relatively new concept for us here in Galway. Dublin, I suppose, has the Greater Dublin region for quite a number of years, and Cork had its CASP, which is Cork Area Strategic Plan. So again, this is relatively new for the west of Ireland. It's a metropolitan strategic plan. It includes all of the city and it includes part of the county. And the 3 settlements in our county that's part of the MASP are Ballyclore, Oranmore and Barna. So they're within the metropolitan area of Galway. This particular metropolitan area was is embedded in the regional spatial and economic strategy. That's where the boundaries came from, and they originally came from the Department of the Environment. So there would have been a discussion that came out of the NPF for all of the country, and those boundaries were set. So the boundaries were set and they were embedded in the RSES, and then subsequently we have to take it from the RSES and put it into our county development plan, and our city colleagues will be doing the same. They will have a metropolitan area strategic plan for their area of the city as well. So like I say, we have the metropolitan area, we've Barna, Oranmore and Ballyclore. And we also have a new enough departure from our perspective of having framework plans. We have 2 framework plans which are in the metropolitan strategic area as well, of Garon, which is the area in Oranmore around the train station, and Briar Hill, which is the area up around the employment bases up around Parkmore. So both of those are a new departure for us. And again, we're very excited about the way that we're trying to plan into the future and give people an opportunity at this point, and we like to hear people's views on all of those. We also have secured €12.28 million under the URDF fund from the department, and that with our partners Irish Rail. We partnered Irish Rail in making the application. Galway County Council made the application and our partners were Irish Rail on that. And that will provide a passing loop at Oranmore of 1 kilometre, a second platform. It'll provide the design of a car park there and the design of the open space, which you'll see in the Garon urban design framework, and also a topology study. So a study with respect to building heights, types of buildings, and ensuring that it all fits in nicely to this very unique and strategic site. And Briar Hill, again, very important up around our employment areas, and to be able to look at how we can fit in residential and other amenities to go along with that around our employment areas and make it all much more sustainable in terms of travel times and in terms of access. So our key towns of Ballinasloe and Tuam, again identified in the North and West Regional Assembly document, as is the place for strategic potential, which is Athenry. Ballinasloe, Tuam, Athenry, Gort and Loughrea will all have standalone local area plans. And in fact, Ballinasloe, we're currently working on that, and there will be a draft Ballinasloe LAP on public display in the third or fourth quarter of this year, with Tuam, Athenry, Gort and Loughrea to follow in the first and second quarter of next year. The self-sustaining towns of Gort and Loughrea, so there's a certain criteria that you have to reach in order to be called a self-sustaining town, and this is something that you'll see to the NPF and also to the RSES as well. So then we have our small growth towns, which is in Tier 5, Clifton, Headford, Moycoolan, Uachtarard and Portumla, and our small growth villages, which are on Carrarua, Spidgel, Ballygar, Dunmore, Glenamaddy, Kinvara and Moycullen. And I suppose all of these settlements have both water and wastewater facilities available in them with capacity, and that's why they are embedded in our county development plan, because again they are sustaining in terms of having water and wastewater. And each one of those has a little piece about their individual the individual town or small town or village, and then there would be a specific zoning map and also a specific flood risk map associated with each one of those, all in volume 2. And then we have tier 7, which is all of the other smaller settlements that are not serviced by, they probably are serviced by water in most cases, but not by wastewater. And again, there are policies in our chapter 3 and 4 with respect to those areas, and it includes our rural areas as well. So again, I suppose the next map just shows where the MASP is and the town, the villages and towns that are in that Ballyclore, like I said, Oranmore and Barna, and then it identifies our key towns and so on, self-sustaining towns, potential towns, and then our small growth towns and small growth villages. So that map just identifies that there. So like I had said, the Volume 2 Metropolitan Strategic Plan has our Ballyclore, Barna, Oranmore, our 2 urban design frameworks of Garron and Briar Hill, and they're all worth to have a look and a flick through. And again, the link is there and that will be published. And just a map to identify that again, Galway city boundary, you can see in the purple, the lighter purple, actual line and so on. And then the purple area is the Galway metropolitan area, and you'll see the towns in the county that are in that particular area. So just before we finish up, we thought it might be useful for people to know how a zoning map is actually formed and what goes into it. Just a very quick overview of it. There's other information as well that we input into it, but just to give a very quick overview. So we start off, we're just taking Oranmore as an example here. We start off with the settlement boundary, and that's just a natural boundary of where the development currently is. Put a boundary around that to contain it, and also remember that Brian spoke about the core strategy and the population allocations that each town and village would have, so that we have to accommodate that population in terms of zoning, and that would also help us to identify where the settlement boundary would be. We then look at all the flood data, and we look at the European sites data, and you can see that for Oranmore. You can see the flood data, and you can also see down further. Now I know this is quite small, but again, you'll be able to blow this up to a little bit bigger so people will be able to see it a little bit better when we publish the presentation. So then we load those on, and then the next one we have there is our cultural heritage. So our things like our recorded monuments and other cultural areas of significance and so on are placed on to the map there. Following on from that, then we put in our residential, existing residential, which is in yellow, and you'll see that the flood maps are imposed on it, superimposed on it, and so are the designated areas. And then you can almost pick out where you're going to put your new residential phase 1 areas, because they're the areas undeveloped within the developed envelope, and you'll see how that kind of emerges as well as everything else. We then pick up where our commercial, business, technology, enterprise areas are currently, and look at what future needs those areas would have in terms of that. And the community facilities, again, where the existing ones are, and we look at any potential population increases, the amount of increases, and what sort of land would be required to be extra land zoned for the expansion of community facilities, things like schools, playing facilities, and community facilities in general. So it builds into a framework then that comes out with what you see in our chapter 2, our volume 2, should I say, with respect to our county plan. Just very quickly, again, all of the zoning plans would be loaded in the same way for Clifton, Headford, Moycoolan, Oughterard, and Portumna, and our small growth towns. And then our small growth villages would be again on Carrarua, on Spidgel, Ballygar, Dunmore, Glenamaddy, Kinvara, and Moyloch, all of those serviced with water and wastewater. And they're defined as growth towns and villages by populations. And there are a number of areas that are also serviced that have a population below 5,000, not very many, but 1 or 2, and they have all their policy objectives in our chapter 3 and 4 in volume 1, so that there is room, of course, for development in those areas as well. So in our appendices, we have a renewable energy strategy, which I spoke about there when we were talking about our chapter 14. We have our housing strategy and housing need, demand and needs assessment, which we did in conjunction with our housing section. Our Galway transport and planning strategy we did in consultation with our road section. Character landscape assessment, again with our heritage officer and all of us here in the planning section. Design guidelines for single rural houses. Record of protected structures, which comes from our conservation officer, and architectural conservation areas also from our conservation officer, and our geological heritage of Ireland comes from our heritage officers. So all of the input there, and again, you can download any of those, have a look at them, and the PDFs are there, downloads to view and make your submissions on all of those. We also have a list of environmental documents which we're required. We have our strategic flood risk assessment. We have our strategic environmental assessment report. We have our strategic environmental assessment reports in our non-technical summary, and we have our Natura impact report as well. All the environmental documents, again, all can be viewed and downloaded and have a look at. So we're coming to the end of the presentation at this stage. Again, as Pat and Brian has mentioned previously, and Una also, hAoine, and the 30th of July is our closing date at 4:30 p.m. You can make them online in writing. And also, anybody who has any other questions, you can email us at forwardplanning@galwaycoco.ie, and we will try, if anybody wants a face-to-face meeting. Again, we have obviously restrictions in place, but we certainly can facilitate it within the guidance of public health guidance that we have in place. So if you just make contact with us at forwardplanning@galwaycoco.ie, we will come back to you and try and arrange a time and answer any queries. And obviously we can answer any queries over the phone as well if people want to contact us that way. So I think just to reiterate that we really want people to engage in the process and to make their submissions and their concerns or ideas known to us. And again, we will identify all of those. What will happen next in the process is, after the closing date, we have 12 weeks in which to prepare a chief executive's report. What that chief executive's report will involve is the synopsis of all submissions that we made in an appendix, and then each one of the submissions will be looked at, and each one of the topics, all of the submissions correlated under the relevant topics of which the submissions are made. There'll be a chief executive's recommendation made. That will be then delivered to our elected members. They will have a number of weeks to consider it, and then we will have some meetings in order to discuss and go through all of the chief executive's report on the draft. What happens after that then, if there's any amendments made as a result of that, just those amendments go back on public display. The members of the public and all interested parties, prescribed bodies and so on will make their submissions on that. Chief Executive's report again, and then finally the members will consider that and adopt the plan, which we expect hopefully to be in about April or May of 2022. So I hope that gave you a good outline of what's in the draft development plan, and we're happy to take any questions. I know I'll hand you back to Pat. We may take some questions now and try and answer those questions for you, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Valerie and Brian, for those presentations. I hope that everybody found this helpful and are more informed on the draft county development plan. As Valerie said there, while the presentation was taking place, there have been a number of questions which my colleague Una has recorded. I might invite you, Una, maybe just if you want to read out some of those questions to our panel, and we'll try and answer them as best we can. Thank you.
Of course, Pat. I'm just going to take the first one that we received by email today. It's actually from Eileen Costello. So I'll take that one first, if you don't mind. The question is, why are Galway County Council zoning residential areas for wind farms? The areas of Ballinamroch, Cailroa here, Cailroa Head, and Cahir and Indwan and Bolishkin and Spidal are zoned as acceptable in principle. There are a lot of dwelling houses within these proposed zoned areas. Why is this even possible? I think that's going over to Angus, you said, Pat?
Yeah, our consultant, Angus Skehan, is online. Maybe if you'd like to take that question, please.
Hi, I believe Conor Skehan is actually meant to answer this question on this part.
Hello, Dave Gallier. Hello, Dave Gallier. The answer is that these are areas of potential, and potential covers the widest spectrum of potential applications, from local applications, small scale applications, all the way through to very large scale commercial applications. What's very important to understand is that potential has to pass through the sieve, or the filter, of the development management process, which examines on a project-by-project basis issues such as proximity to residential areas, proximity to details of ecological sensitivities, archaeological sensitivities, and a whole range of other issues like that. And the development management process draws those details out. So the indication of potential is a very different thing from what is actually likely to emerge from the development management project, but process, I beg your pardon. So it is very important to understand that what we're trying to do is give a broad brush indication of areas of potential, but no more than that. Iúil.
Thank you, Conor. Just as one more question that came in by email, and then I'll get to the ones online here. So one from Peggy regarding page 66. I would like clarification on whether the sea is marked as open to consideration for wind potential from Barna/Galway out as far as the Aran Islands, basically Galway Bay. And also on page 67, the sea is marked acceptable in principle for solar energy. Is this correct? And if so, why? What does this mean for our coast regarding wind energy and also solar potential? So Conor, I don't know if you can come in on that one again, or
yes, I can. I'm not sure. Am I online, Una? Can you hear me there?
We can hear you fine. Yeah, we can't see you, but we can hear you, Conor. Yeah.
That's great. Not seeing me is no great loss. Thank you very much. The important thing for the questioner is to understand that while the county council itself has no jurisdiction below the low water mark, that's a matter for the department. But it is important generally to understand the potential in an area, particularly such as the western parts of Galway, where the land and the sea are completely mixed up, and people can there is very little difference, so to speak, between the land and the sea. It's important for people to understand the general potential in that area. Clearly, a maritime area, any one of the many sea locks in western Connemara have no potential to be used, for instance, for something like a solar farm. But it is important to give clear definition and distinction for people about the potential for something such as wind energy, and to understand what either has or does not have potential in those areas, to give people, everybody who's participating in commenting on the plan, an indication of areas where somebody might make an application because of either the presence of wind energy potential or the absence of potential due to something like the many factors that Valerie earlier described that are used to make up a typical zoning, which might be issues such as landscape sensitivity, ecological sensitivity, or heritage sensitivity. That's it.
Conor, there was another part there to Peggy's question, but I believe you've already covered that. But Peggy, if he hasn't, just let us know in the Q&A here and we'll try our best to get back to it. So just on to the online questions, there's one here from an anonymous attendee. How has population been modelled, and does that modelling take into account the increase in remote working as we emerge from the pandemic? There is little doubt that recent house price rises in rural and not so rural Galway alike have been, at least in part, fuelled by this. So Valerie, I think, is going to take that one.
Yeah, I can take that one. So effectively, the modelling in terms of the population allocation, we've been given the population allocation it comes out of the NPF, so the National Planning Framework Roadmap gives population allocations for areas, and then it comes down to the regional economic strategy. So the population allocation for County Galway up to 2028 has been set at 18,000, or just a little bit over 600. So that's the population targets that are there. And then we have to look, sorry, my system was just about to shut down. Sorry, apologies. A message just coming up there. So effectively, the population has been given to us. And then we allocate the population accordingly. Now, there's also targets set out in the roadmap in the NPF, where 30% of the population has to go to the key towns, certain percentage of the population has to go into the MAS, the metropolitan strategic area, and then so on to the other remaining towns, and that's how the population is allocated. So again, it would be a population increase of 18,000 over the course of the 6 years. In our last development plan, the population increase would have been 13,000, and we wouldn't have reached that population target of 13,000. So again, the allocation is already set by the National Planning Framework. And in terms of the remote working and so on and so forth, I know that things have changed, but again, the population allocations would have taken a certain element of that in, but there would be, again, as part of the county development plan process, once the plan is adopted, 2 years into the process, we have to do a review of all of the different policy objectives in there and see how it is performing in terms of either population or anything else, but how each one of them are performing. So there is a mechanism there in order to look at that, and if any amendments would be required to be made at that point, then a call would be made on that particular thing. But just to note that in our chapter 5, we do have a piece on remote working. We also have a policy objective in relation to remote working and remote working hubs and smart hubs in our county towns and so on. And that's all in our chapter 5. We'd also have a piece in our development management standards with respect to remote working as well. So I hope that answers that question.
Good, Marcus, Valerie. There's another question here from an anonymous attendee as well. Why has Balachlor been included in the metropolitan area rather than designated as a small growth village such as Moycullen? What difference does that designation make?
Thanks, Una. I can take that again. So again, like I had said, I think the question might have been in before we had got to that part of the presentation, but effectively the boundaries of the metropolitan area had been defined by the department and are embedded in the regional strategy, the region spatial and economic strategy. So there are towns within the county that are there, and that's why they're in there as opposed to being in a small growth village and so on and so forth. So they are part of the metropolitan strategic area, and then we have to plan for that in accordance with the National Planning Framework and also in accordance with the regional economic and spatial strategy. So our spatial and economic strategy. So that's basically why it sits within that tier of the plan as opposed to a small village. I suppose the differences that it makes, it's part of that metropolitan area. It has some advantages in that, again, there would be more population allocated to it. It's sustainable towns is what we want to be creating and so on and so forth. So the more population would lead again to more services and so on and so forth. But again, we're very mindful of the fact that it's more population, but it has to be relative to the population there, that it can't just be a huge explosion of population over a very short period of time. But it does allow more population allocation to the settlements that are in the MASP because they are in the MASP. So I hope that answers that question.
Good, Valerie. The next question there from Edel Mitchell. What details are there regarding the development of the BIA Innovator Campus in Athenry and how this is linked to the different aspects of the strategy? There's limited reference within the document. How does this link to the wider economic corridor initiatives? So Brian, I think you're going to take that one.
Thanks, Una. Thank you, Una. Yeah, you'll just I'll refer you to chapter 5 there in relation to the BIA Innovator part, into the BIA Innovator Campus. So there's a couple of things, I suppose, in the narrative of that chapter, of chapter 5 of volume 1 of the plan. You can see that the plan is supportive of the food industry sector across the county, you know, the gastronomy sector as a whole, and it does make specific reference to the BIA Innovator Park. So it is supported there, and also it's followed then by a high-level policy objective in the plan to support in any way that it can, provided it accords with the, you know, with the provisions of the draft development plan. But the policy objective there is there. It's you know, there's one policy objective. It's for relates specifically to the Be Innovative Park, and a second one on the gastronomy sector itself. So I'd refer the participant to the meeting to pages 104 and 105 of volume 1 that sets out the policy objectives, and then page 100, which is set out in chapter 5, that contains some narrative on the Be Innovative Campus and gastronomy in County Galway. So I hope that answers their question.
Brian. So the next question there is it possible to get a copy of relevant GIS files to further examine? This data is very tricky to find. I'm specifically thinking about cycle infrastructure. That came in from Brian O'Shaughnessy.
Yes, sorry, just in relation to that, if that contributor would like to email us in at forwardplanning@galway.co.ie and maybe identify exactly what they are, we'll try to get some maps printed off and we can set up an appointment for them to come in and view that and see if we can, you know, zoom into the maps and so on. But if you do zoom in, if you go into the PDFs, I know that sometimes you actually download the PDF at the start of each chapter and you can zoom in quite closely. However, if it is a case that you're not getting the information that you require, if you just give us send us a mail at forwardplanning@galway.co.ie, over the next few days we will come back to you and try ascertain what maps that you want. If you specify what that is, we'll get those maps, try to reproduce those maps for you, and then try to be able to make them a little bit bigger that you'll be able to see the detail that you need.
Valerie, the next question there again is from an anonymous attendee. What are the key objectives for protection of water quality, with only 45% of the county's waters achieving good status and our high status waters decreasing from 13% to 8%? A lot needs to be done to protect what we have and improve what we have lost in order to meet Water Framework Directive objectives. I think, Valerie, are you taking that one as well?
Indeed, yeah. Yeah. Yes, sorry. So our chapter 7 outlines water and wastewater, and you'll note at the start of each one of the chapters, there is a piece where it talks about all of the different guidance and strategic context. So it goes through all of the different strategic context that's relevant to that particular chapter. So again, we support all of the documents, all of the national frameworks, all of the climate action, the water and wastewater, the Irish Water Investment Plan, and so on, and the protection of water. So there would be a number of policy objectives with respect to water supply, enhancing water supply infrastructure, but also protection of water supplies, the river basin management plan for Ireland. There's an objective with respect to that, the requirement to liaise with Irish Water, and also the Water Framework Directive. I think that was mentioned in the question as well, with respect to supporting the preparation of drinking water safety plans and source protection plans to protect sources of public water supply in accordance with the requirements of the Water Framework Directive. There's also a specific policy with respect to water quality and require all new development proposals would ensure that there would not be an unacceptable impact on water quality, quantity, including surface water, groundwater, designated source protection areas, river corridors, and associated wetlands. We also have a conservation of water supply there, and we talk about water conservation and water mains rehabilitation and the promotion of water conservation. And I know that's a wider context. I know it's the protection of the supply and to ensure that we do protect it. But I think the protection of our water supplies in WS2 and also the Water Framework Directive as a specific policy objective in WS6, all in chapter 7. So I hope that answers that question there. Certainly, if somebody has concerns about any of those things and want additional, if they want additional detail or so on, by all means, make the submission and we'll certainly have a look at the submission and detail it in the Chief Executive's report and so on. If there's something that needs to be included, we'll be happy to do that.
Valerie, the next question from an anonymous attendee again, where there are settlements which had a zoning plan in previous CDP's county development plans, but will not have a plan in the forthcoming county development plan, will these zonings still be valid?
Thanks, Una. I can answer that. So the 2015 County Development Plan had in relation to zoning maps, there were two separate variations, and that was the zoning map for Barna, and then we had our Gaeltacht plan, so that included zonings for on Spidgale, Ballyclore, and on Cowrua. And so in the case of on Spidgale and Ballyclore, these are now small growth villages as set out in volume 2 of the draft plan. Ballyclore is in the Metropolitan Plan, which is again in volume 2 of the draft plan. So we haven't, the existing variations that have zonings in the existing county development plan, they are zoned again in the draft county development plan. And we've also, just if you're referring to places that maybe don't have zonings, we've worked very closely with Irish Water and, zoned where there is infrastructure capacity, wastewater and water supply infrastructure to support increased population. So I hope that answers that question.
Gormaga Brian, the next question there from an anonymous, is the new concept of a MASP in Galway likely to result in a redrawing of the city boundary? So I think Valerie's going to give that one a go.
To be honest, that is not the intention from what we would have gathered. From the point of view is, like I said, Dublin has had the Greater Dublin area where they look at, I suppose, a whole area around Dublin and how it's impacting. Cork has its MASP, so they've had their CASP, the Cork Area Strategic Plan for a long time. And I suppose these are just Limerick now and Galway. They're relatively new to Galway. So I think what it hopes to do is that it looks at the area that's influenced directly by the city in terms of that, but and the idea is to try to integrate everything in terms of locations of settlements, in terms of development, in terms of connections, access, and so on and so forth. So that's the idea behind the MASP. It certainly wouldn't be, it wouldn't in any way be something that we would consider certainly a redrawing of any city boundary. That is not the concept behind it as we understand it. What will happen is we'll have our piece about our MASP. The MASP is actually enshrined in the Regional Spatial and Economic Strategy for the West region, and we are the North and West region, should I say, and then we are obliged to take that down to our county plan, and our city colleagues will take it into their city plan as well, and then there is a liaison between the two authorities to ensure that there's consistency with respect to the policy in both plans with respect to the MASP. So hopefully that answers that question.
Margaret Valerie, now ceist as Gaeilge, I'll read it as Gaeilge first. Níl aon tagart de loníochtaí nó bailte líneacha cé go bhfuil siad seo luatas na treoirlínta náisiúnta pleanála ceann fá. So just for the purposes of our planners here, translation would be in roughly, there is no reference to settlements or linear towns, even though these are mentioned in the national planning guidelines. Why?
Not quite the only answer that I can give to this from my understanding of the question, and I may not be understanding it correctly. So if we're not, and it isn't just maybe to put a question in the Q&A again, we do talk about smaller settlements in our tier 7 of our settlement strategy, which is on page 44 of the draft. Now that may be slightly different because it's online, but again, rural settlements and the rural countryside, and it does note rural villages and the wider rural region. So rural encompasses villages and the wider open countryside, and there may not be good public transport or regional connectivities, but maybe high car dependency, and the open countryside provides for the rural economies and rural communities based on agriculture, forestry, tourism and rural enterprise. And there's a list of settlements there, so I'm not quite sure whether that answers that question or not, and I'm not sure what planning guidelines, maybe if the contributor would like to kind of clarify that, we might be able to clarify and answer a little bit better for you.
Gurmagus Valerie, so rís leannach cearcehead ach mar bhfuil an tolas an sin, mas féidir díreach tuile silarú hút maidir le díreach ceirt a geis sa geis sin agah is féidir a chuirteach sa Q&A rís. A leannach cearcehead gon Dréachtphlean bu cearc amach an tolas an sin. So the next question there, just in relation to, it's from Edward Garrity. Can you make submissions with respect to suggested changes to the proposed zoning of specific lands in the current draft plan? So I think Brian is going to take that one. Thank you, Brian.
Thanks, Una. Yeah, just to advise the participant, we welcome submissions from members of the public during this public consultation, again, up until the 30th of July, and they may relate to zoning related submissions if you wish. And again, I would say go to consult.galway.ie and you can make your submission there. We also receive hard copy submissions, and I know that submissions have been received through forwardplanning@galwaycoco.ie. So they are the options. And again, you have up until 4:30 on the 30th of July to make your submission in writing to us. So I hope that answers that question.
Good morning, Brian. Another question here from Anonymous. Have Gaeltacht population targets been agreed with Údarás na Gaeltachta? So I think, Brian, you're going to take that one as well.
Just to advise, yeah, so I think Valerie covered the subject of the population and where the population is derived from across the county with the NPF roadmap. But it is our intention to, we do recognise, of course, that we have a Gaeltacht area, the largest Gaeltacht area in the county, and it is our intention to meet with Údarás na Gaeltachta during this consultation. Yeah, so we'll be meeting them during the month of July to discuss the draft plan and to discuss, their views on matters pertaining to the Gaeltacht area. So I hope that answers that question.
Good morning, Brian. So just there's a comment here as well. Linear settlements can be populated at greater than 5,000. No problem.
Yeah, if that participant wants to send us an email specifically referencing the area they're referring to, and they can email forwardplanning@galwaycoco.ie, and we'd be happy to look into this further for you to find more information on it and have a discussion with you on it. So if you could email forwardplanning@galwaycoco.ie, that would be great. Thank you.
I might just add as well, as Brian has said, absolutely in that specific thing, but in chapter 3 and in chapter 4, depending on whether you're looking at urban or rural settlements, there are individual policies with respect to the policy objectives there for settlements that don't have zoning plans in the county development plan or the draft county development plan. So it doesn't mean just because there isn't a zoning plan that we won't allow development within existing settlements. We certainly will, and there will be criteria around that, and they can be found in chapter 3 and 4. So perhaps maybe that might aid as well. But by all means, email us on forwardplanning@galwaycoco.ie if we haven't answered your question. Just simply for any clarity, we'd be happy to give clarity.
Thanks, Valerie. There's just a side note here from one of the attendees, Sean. He just says linear settlements can be populated greater than 5,000 as McCarthy research for previous CDPs. So just to note that. There's another question here as Gailge. On May Tuncher ag plan Forbartha Chontae chomhairle na Gaillimhe ó hí fáusú chána áil heavy sí ráile sa Chontae mar hampla ní bhíon in trénacha ag gemacht an gahar taréis fiche taréis seachtas arhinú deadúna. So bear with me now a second, I have to translate this. So will there be will the Galway County Council draft development plan have any impact on the rail services in the county in relation to improvements? For example, there are no trains leaving the city after 7:20 on Saturday or Sunday.
To answer that, I suppose from our perspective, that isn't our remit. Our remit would be with Irish Rail and so on, and servicing around it. All I can say is that they are our partner in trying to provide additional train services and more train services in and out of the city, and that's the purpose again of the funding that we got at Garon with our partners in Irish Rail. But with respect to timetabling and all of that, that wouldn't be within our remit, but it's certainly within Irish Rail's remit. So I suppose that's where possibly that element of it, but the amount of services and so on, we are working with our partner in Irish Rail through trying to put the infrastructure in place in order to try to get more trains in and out of the city, both for commuter and also for intercity.
Gur Margaret Valerie, so siad dom trein a chéine is smó a déile le sin ach go mín coibbrú bon an teagúnaí a trohéin agus an dom planala a charíis má bhín tilolalas webe sin tá míle fáilsrúp sanguilíana linn nó ceistel chuirsteach an Jeffer sin. So I think that's all the questions for now, unless anything else comes up. Gur Mahagi ar fad. Oh, Pash, you're still on mute.
Thank you, Una, for taking those questions, and thank you to Valerie and Brian for answering them as well. I suppose at this stage, I'd like to thank everyone for their attendance at the at this webinar this evening, and for your interaction as well, and all your questions. I'd also like to thank Connor and David from CAS for their assistance in the webinar this evening. I suppose to close, we're inviting your submissions on the county development plan, and you can make those to us either in writing or electronically via the website to the Planning Authority before Friday the 30th of July 2021 at 4:30 p.m. You can make your submissions online at consult.galway.ie. So you can also make them in writing to the Planning Department at Galway County Council, Orison County, Prospect Hill, Galway. Thank you very much again for your interaction and for coming to the webinar. Thank you.